Welcome to Playing with Fire, the podcast for people who are ready to custom build their love.
We're talking about non-monogamy, however you design it, as an individuation opportunity.
Want to leave the default and make your life spectacularly you? You're in the right place.
Let's talk about the basics of relationship agreements.
Okay, I'm game, but just so you know, I love this topic.
Yes. Okay, so we'll try to stick to the basics.
Okay, because I could talk about this topic for I could start and just talk for a month. No problem.
Yeah, I believe that's true.
So relationship agreements in my world come in three styles, three different ways that people can approach them. Should we start there?
Let's start with that. Yep. What would we make agreements about?
So agreements, to be clear, agreements, I don't care what you call your agreements. This is the language I use for them. I think of three types of agreements. One is my relationship philosophy, right? That is actually an agreement I usually make with myself, but a lot of times we use them with partners too to describe in this like sort of vague sense without a lot of super explicit rules or negotiation. This is basically what I feel a relationship should be like. And this is what I try to align with. So that's not exactly what I would call an agreement, but a lot of people use relationship philosophies to take the place of agreements. And
I see.
That's why I put it under this category. That's what I actually see most people relying on is I have a relationship philosophy. And from there, I will make my ongoing conversational agreements. But a lot of times those folks also don't have any really explicit negotiated agreements. So now we'll move into the explicit negotiated agreements.
Yep. Okay. Yeah, because I'm familiar with the process where, okay, we have a general idea of what relationships are for. I'm sure we will make all the same decisions from here on out. Yeah, okay, let's get a little more explicit.
So I like relationship philosophies. I think of them as they can be a good North Star. They can be a good way to get on the same page. They can also be a great way to talk with new partners about how you generally attempt to move in relationships. However, they have some limitations because philosophies are meant to be our ontological ground, right? They are our ontological ground. They are our epistemological stance. They are the nature of our experience in relationships, and they form the way we ask questions about relationships.
Right.
But our agreements can actually be way more practical than that. So let's talk about the other kinds of agreements. I think of the other kinds as being either experimental agreements, short term,
let's try something.
Yeah, let's try some stuff out. Or holistic relationship agreements. Holistic meaning these will encompass and they'll also be durable. They're going to be all like pretty encompassing of many domains of my life. They're going to be thorough and they're going to be pretty durable over the course of time. So I may agree to these to last on the order of months, years, even decades.
So more comprehensive agreements covering more fundamental aspects.
So we've got relationship philosophies and then holistic relationship agreements. And now down to my actual favorite kind of relationship agreement, which is what I call the minimum viable agreement. Minimum viable agreements are experimental agreements. They are intentionally short-term, small containers in which we reveal what actually works for us, what we have the ability to articulate, what we need to learn about what we need in our relationships, what we want in our relationships. MVAs are messy, but they are also really, really productive. They are so good at helping people. The MVA process is so exceptional at helping people go from having an idea of what they want to, I actually can communicate about what I want, and I can communicate where my edges are, and I can do then repair if my edges get bumped up against.
Right. What do you mean by they're messy?
So these are messy because they're experimental. So you trained in physics, right?
I did.
And did you train in theoretical or experimental?
Experimental.
Yeah. Was everything you did super safe and like very controlled and never destroyed anything?
I got a piece of fiber optic filament like right through my hand once. So no, stuff happens.
Right.
Okay.
So the experimental conditions necessarily open us up to the fact that, yeah, some stuff is going to happen. And even some stuff that we don't mean to happen may happen.
Okay.
So I don't
So
want
messy
people,
as in unpredictable outcome.
also because we don't know what we don't know.
Mm-hmm.
That's why we use the experimental condition, because when I'm setting up an agreement, I can rely on my imagination up to a point to imagine what I need, what I want, where my limits are, and then I can rely on my actual skills to articulate this and my negotiation skills to deal with the fact that the people I'm making agreements with might have different needs, wants, desires, bottom lines. And even if I do all of that awesome and my imagination is so on point getting it, I still don't know what I don't know. And I don't know what's going to happen when we get out into the field and we start messing with stuff and we start doing stuff. We also don't
that
know.
does sound messy.
Yeah, and we also don't know what our unconscious will do.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I'm a depth psychologist, so let's bring that into the picture. Most of us imagine that we're making our agreements from a place of conscious rationality.
Uh-huh. I thought that was all there was for quite a long time.
That's why you were so cute back then.
I make decisions and then I act on those decisions, and that's all going to go just smoothly. Right. What could go wrong?
And of course, most people are familiar with the iceberg image of what consciousness and unconscious are, right? So the iceberg, the part you can see, is what you know. It's what you're aware of. Most of the iceberg, most of us, is under the water, in the unconscious, one with the unconscious. And so that aspect of us will also be experiencing the ramifications of the agreements that we make, the experimental conditions we put ourselves in, the stuff we go play with and do. And those unconscious aspects of us, they're going to have some feelings and thoughts about all this too. And the thing about your unconscious is we can keep bringing unconscious material forward, but there's an unending supply. So even if we do a great job attempting to make agreements that account for everything, we have to remember that the unconscious is here too.
We have to remember the rest of the iceberg. Yeah. Yep. Okay.
So that said, I have developed a process. I teach it in the year of opening. I find this process to be incredibly helpful, especially for people who are trying to create a lot of safety by making a lot of rules, or for people who've never made agreements, right? They're like, I don't know, we just kind of have an ongoing conversation. This process is pretty formal, but also pretty succinct. It can be a tight process. I mean, you and I still use this process. 15 years in, we've been using a version of this for at least 13 years. And because that's as early as I can find them in my journal is evidence of this. And this process helped us figure out how to share our language, how to make common language around agreements, and helped us create safety together.
Yeah, that is an important piece of the agreement making process. The agreement is important, but so is the agreement making process.
Yeah.
Because, what you were just saying, in the process of working out our agreements, we learned how to talk about things so that we both understood what we were talking about.
Right. So the minimum viable agreement, the MVA, it's got this cute little name, and that's just to help us remember that there is a structure that we can rely on. But I encourage everyone to then make this process your own. You can take this. This is a jumping off point. Once you've been working with it for a while, I've been teaching this to people for years, and now people have their own versions and variations on this theme. But it is a great jumping off point. So I'm happy to just share the process.
Very generous of you, because it is really helpful.
I don't know. I just like something that's practical. So
it is.
The very first question whenever I'm making an agreement is, what's the purpose of this agreement? And that is actually first a question I want to ask of myself as an individual. So whether there's 2 people, 5 people, 12 people making an agreement, first I want to ask myself this question. What is this agreement's purpose. Like, why am I even coming to the table? Why am I trying to articulate this? What's going on? For some of us, the answer might come up right away. Like, I'm looking for safety. I'm looking to build trust. I'm looking for security. For others, it might be, oh, I'm looking to explore my growth edges. I want to be expansive. I want to get out there and try something new. And I know that that's outside of the parameters of what we have been doing. So, yeah, for me, this agreement's purpose is so that I can grow. And let's be real. For some of us, the agreement may serve some shadowy purposes, some purposes that we might not love admitting to, but it's worth mentioning. I have definitely made agreements at times that were about control. Like, when I get right down to it, what do I want? I want some control. And that makes me think about our early relationship when I would make agreements with you, and I felt very disempowered on the whole in our relationship. So when I would make agreements with you, I could feel this sort of scrambling for, like, I need control of something.
Looking for, yeah.
I want control of something.
So that colors the agreement making process.
Yeah. And the thing is, I wasn't in a place to admit that to you yet. We just didn't have the language that we needed, and I didn't feel safe enough.
Well, yeah, that
but I
makes sense.
I see evidence of this back in my own early journals of, like, yep, I knew I was looking for control. It was hard to me to admit it because that did not seem like an attractive quality to have. But this is part of the doing your shadow work, is actively acknowledging that we are whole beings with shadow and light, with complexity, and sometimes with nefarious purpose. So, and I can be seeking control without even meaning to harm, right? Like, sometimes we're seeking control, and we're like, no, it's for everyone's good.
And you mentioned safety too. You know, if you're looking to increase your personal safety in an agreement, that might include finding ways to get more control over things. And I think what I'm hearing you say here is, during the agreement making process, don't forget about the shadows.
Yeah. So I want you to get clear on the purpose for yourself so that you can keep track of that. Like, attend to that. So if I notice that one of the things I want is some control, I'm going to be looking out for, where am I subtly manipulating? Or where am I setting up parameters that are designed to increase my sense of control, that aren't really serving what I truly want, like my whole person wants, and who my whole person wants to show up as in relationship. So this takes some deep self-reflection. And I think it's worth also bringing this question to the beginning of an agreement process. Now, if you and I are making an agreement, I can have done that self-reflection, and then we could also agree on, what is the purpose of this agreement that we're making? Like, hey, what are we working on right now? And a really common one is, we're working to build trust. We want to establish an agreement so that we can establish, hey, look at us, holding in our integrity, being accountable for where there are ruptures, where there are challenges. Like, if I make an agreement, it's not so I can just see the bad stuff or where we fall down, or it's not so I can weaponize that and use that against my partner. It's also so I can celebrate. I mean, it's never for weaponizing, but it can serve the purpose of actively celebrating how I am in integrity, how I am holding myself to the standards that I mean to show up as, and how we are together collaborating on creating the expansivity that we actually want in our relational system.
And celebrations are worth, I'm glad you brought that word in, because they're worth keeping in mind, particularly for the minimum viable agreement, these shorter term ones, when you've come to the conclusion of your agreement time, it's time to celebrate the ways it went well.
Yeah.
You're also going to want to think about the things that didn't and work on that, but don't forget to celebrate the wins along the way.
Definitely. Celebrate, make a cake.
Make cake, have pie.
Okay, so there are some ingredients. Like I said earlier, this is a pretty formal process in that I can outline for you the pieces, the ingredients of it. The ingredients for an MVA are setting the duration, understanding the domains of the agreement, And establishing where the deal breakers are and what your response plans will be if a deal breaker gets hit. So duration, domains, deal breakers. Those are the
Okay.
3 key ingredients.
And you want to dive into those?
Yeah.
So what's a domain?
Oh, actually, I think we should start with duration.
Okay, let's start with duration.
So the reason I start with duration is, remember, we said these are short-term agreements.
Yeah. Okay. Well, and so that's, yeah. Okay. That makes perfect sense.
This helps. This helps a lot because a short-term experimental condition lets us take an appropriate size risk and feel like, okay, we can actually, if I try to make an agreement with you and say, okay, this is our new agreement, basically in perpetuity, like I'm making this agreement. Ooh, I'm going to make those my boundaries are going to feel real tight then.
Yeah, right.
But instead, I encourage people to make agreements, MBAs, that last between 1 and 4 weeks. 1 to 4 weeks, sometimes just a day even. Recently, someone in a year of opening cohort made a 1-day agreement so that they could try something on. Short term, make the duration nice and tight. Pick a time box that works for you. And the trick to making this duration is you set it, and I want you to enter it on your calendar when you are reviewing this. Like, it is not just going to last in perpetuity. So you're going to have a start time and you're going to have a review time. That's how you know the duration of this agreement. And it's going to be on your calendars so that you plan to do your review. Otherwise, you don't get to learn from the experiment. This is data collection. Let's learn.
That scheduling, that has been so important. I've seen it not just in me, which is very important for me, my relationship at the time, but I've seen in the people in the year of opening how often that particular tool has been very helpful. Plan, schedule, put it on the calendar.
And it's so easy for us to make agreements and then revisit them only when something's gone wrong.
Yeah, and it's really hard to celebrate those times.
And sometimes they're going to go right. Awesome. Yep. So the last agreement you and I made was a 2-week agreement. Because we were traveling and we needed a container to hold us around the travel.
Yep.
And so we still use these, even though we also have some long-term relationship agreements and a clear relationship philosophy
they're
that
not
we share.
Mutually exclusive at all.
No, we stack them in. Mm-hmm. So duration is short and it is scheduled. Domains, though. You asked about the domains. You could use the Max Hill's relationship smorgasbord as a way to think about where are you, what is this agreement covering exactly? Mm-hmm. When it comes to opening up our relationships, this might be, where am I being expansive and where am I going to be exclusive still? And now you might not have any areas of exclusivity in your relationship. That's fine. But for a lot of people listening to Playing with Fire, I know a lot of you do have areas of exclusivity, and some of you might think you don't. And my question would be, okay, let's reflect more deeply. Is it okay with you if a partner next week decides to buy a house with someone else, or decides to have a child with someone else, or just decides to move across the country? Most of us actually do have some areas where we're like, oh, actually, I'm not available to have all of my partners be completely expansive in every direction. And so just acknowledge that. If there are areas where you want exclusivity, where you're maintaining exclusivity, name it. And then allow your attention to go to, okay, what's new? Where are we going to be pushing into new exploratory energy? And the relationship smorgasbord is a great place to start. Inside the year of opening, I have a list of domains that offer ideas where you might experiment. A common one is people experimenting in their sensuality, their sexuality, or their friendships or their emotional depth with other people. Those are really common places. This is a very truncated description.
Yeah.
But the point here is, once you've set the duration, we need to set the what. What are we making this agreement about? And again, if you're new to agreements, or if you want to make this agreement actually like really functional, keep it small. Mm-hmm. Keep it really small. So that last agreement that I remember making with you was around a time of travel. So we had the duration was sort of natural. It was the 3 days leading up to the travel.
Away.
Yeah, and then the time we were away and 3 days after. And the domains were, we weren't really working too much on exclusivity or versus expansivity in this particular agreement. It was more about what areas were we going to be practicing independence and where were we going to come back together. because we were traveling and I wanted to make sure we had space for both of those activities. So we listed this out, but it wasn't like in this agreement, we weren't talking about our householding because we were actually talking about travel. We weren't talking about our business arrangements. We weren't we weren't even talking about finances because that was all handled. So we really brought it down so that the domains that this agreement covered were narrow. And that is what lets you actually start to get into, what is it like to really talk through my needs and if I narrow the domains down, I can actually get to the bottom of something.
And in that situation, we were kind of looking to the purpose of that agreement. The principal purpose was to maintain a level of safety and stability. Mm-hmm. But there was also some experimental aspects to it. We were trying something new. And keep your experiments simple so you can evaluate the results.
Right. And what happens in experimental conditions if we have a bunch of variables instead of one variable? We have confounding factors.
We have confounding factors. You can't figure out.
Tell which thing caused
what was the cause. Yeah, there's correlation all over the place, but where's the cause?
Yeah.
Right.
So the simpler the agreement you can make, and this is why another reason why a short-term agreement can be helpful, because if I play with a 1 day or 1 week agreement, I just explore in one area, that feels doable. And then we need to address the trickier part, which is, where are my deal breakers?
Yeah.
Anybody making an agreement who doesn't know what the deal breakers are, where are your edges? Where are the boundary conditions? If you don't, you don't really have an agreement. What you have is half an agreement, and it is not going to work out in the big picture, because if you don't know where your edges are, then you actually have no idea what to do next. What happens when feelings get hurt, when boundaries get overrun? If you haven't stated where your deal breakers are, how is your partner supposed to know?
Right.
If you haven't made a plan, a response plan for when there is a deal breaker gets hit, what are you going to do? Like, really, what are you going to do? So frequently I hear people describing how they've made an agreement and they'll outline what their agreement is. And I'll say, cool. So what happens if that agreement is violated? And they'll say something like, I won't tolerate that. I understand. I know. I get it. But tell me, what are you going to do? What happens next?
Yes, and because this is all about practicality. What will happen? What will the next things be?
I want you to know what the deal breakers are, and then understand and have in place a response plan for yourself. And that response plan is about a bunch of things. It's about, okay, well, what happens? Do we take a break? Like, do we take a break? We just did an episode on taking a productive break. Do we take a 2-hour pause so that we can each go collect ourselves? Or do we need to consider taking a significant break because we actually need some time to process what has just come up? There's no set recipe, but response plans that have in them some nervous system regulation of whatever kind works for you, and then a plan to come back together and discuss what happens next. Because if you have any kind of relationship and you say, well, I just won't tolerate that. Okay. Even if you're going to end the relationship, something has to happen. The ending has to happen.
There are still many questions about how and what will happen. Mm-hmm.
So I like when our relationship agreements, especially our short-term ones, just say what will happen if. So in a short-term agreement, if you violate our sexual health agreements, what are the next steps? What will happen? And a lot of people think about the benefits of, okay, let's use sexual health. It's a common one. It comes up a lot. If you were to violate our sexual health agreements, we have parameters in line for what kind of barrier methods we use, who we play with, or whether one of us or both of us are taking PrEP. There's so many options here. If that gets violated, I need to know what steps are going to happen next. Like, for instance, do you need to disclose that to me before we have sex next? Short answer, yes.
Yes.
But listing disclosure needs to happen before there's another sexual contact, another intimate contact. For some people, that is a disclosure needs to happen before we have our next intimate conversation, let alone intimate contact. Like, I don't want you to just put off having sex with me. No, I want disclosure. And then there's testing protocol. So what's going to happen? What feels comfortable for you? You can turn to sexual health resources to see, like, okay, what are the protocols that I should follow? Who should get tested? When should we get tested? What sort of barrier methods do we want to use in order to protect everybody? What exposure risks did we have? What exposure risks are we comfortable with? All of those practical questions. And those are the ones that people often will put into their response plans.
So is this... is the nature of a deal breaker that it is a significant enough issue that it really warrants thinking about ahead of time?
The nature of a deal breaker is that it is anything that will cause you to take a pause and be like, oh, I'm not, okay. I need to gather myself.
Yeah.
A deal breaker is a little bit like hitting yellow in a kink scene where we're like, okay, we don't even need to be in red. We're just in like, whoa, this is outside of my expectations. We said, for instance, yes, we're being sexually expansive, but we did not say it was okay to exchange fluids of a certain nature with people, something like that.
Yeah.
Anything that would cause you pause is worth considering as a potential deal breaker. And we're using sexual health here just as an example. These could also be emotional ramifications. This could be the impact that you feel over different types of relationships or relationships with new types of people. It's up to you. But the steps that I just listed in the response plan, like self-regulation, co-regulation, practical steps for ensuring everyone is receiving the health care they need, those are the ones people tend to think about. And they make sense, right? Our logical, rational brain can wrap its head around those.
It's easy to see that it's time to step back and take a minute to decide what's next.
But we also need to plan for what's going to happen emotionally because a deal breaker has just been hit.
Yeah.
We make agreements in good faith that we will keep them. But in reality, agreements get broken lots. Like stuff happens. And we just don't live in a perfect world. And we could get so deep into this. We could talk about the reasons why. In fact, that would be a great conversation. Why? Why do any of us break the rules? Like, let's deep dive into that in another conversation.
Another one.
But stuff happens. We interpret our agreements in the moment, live in the moment, in ways that don't necessarily line up with our partners. That happens all the time. What I need to see is, what is my response plan for the emotional impact that this will have on the parts of me that are hurt?
Yeah.
Do I have a plan that allows me, the hurt version of me, to feel able to address the rupture and do the repair? What do I need to have in place? So this could also include things like, hey, if one of us, hits a deal breaker and causes that, I'm gonna want an apology and accountability letter. Right. I'm gonna want time for a long imago dialogue. See episode 129. Yeah. Or I'm going to need time to allow myself to go see my personal therapist and process this with someone who's not you. Or there are a million things, including also, what are you not going to do? Like, are we going to refrain from getting into a really brutal fight? Are we going to take steps?
Yeah.
Are we going to sleep separately because that feels safer?
So there are lots of tools that we can, and some of them are general and you teach about them in the year of opening, and some of them are going to be specific to your particular self and your particular relationship. And so we have duration and domain and deal breakers. Deal breakers they require some thinking.
And it includes making a response plan.
Yeah.
If you don't know what the next step is, your agreement is not complete.
You're not done yet. So what are some of the we've got some ideas of how to make an agreement. Mm-hmm. What are some of the pitfalls? What are some of the ways these agreements can maybe bite us a little?
Oh, there's so many
There
ways,
are so many. We can't go
unfortunately.
into all of them.
But the downside of making agreements is actually the reason why I see people neglect to make agreements. They're like, we're just going to break them anyways. Or an agreement only gives me a way to wind up feeling disappointed. But we're dealing with this stuff, whether we deal with it consciously and proactively, or whether we just deal with it reactively and unconsciously.
Yeah.
I'm going to take the first option. Let's be proactive and bring conscious intentionality to it.
Yep.
And over time, what I've seen is that lets me avoid the pitfalls of missing the growth opportunity, or misunderstanding each other. Like, that's one of the pitfalls, is we just didn't understand each other. We weren't able to get on the same page. What do you see coming up as pitfalls?
Well, so one of the things that I see sometimes happening with agreements is weaponizing.
Yeah.
Using them as a club, which, coercion, trying to get a particular result by both entering into the agreement in bad faith, but even if you enter into it with good faith, then using the agreement as though it is an external thing that will tell us what to do.
And as if you're separate, as if it's separate from your relationship. And it can put us on different sides, as if we're in an adversarial relationship. And that is the difficulty around agreements. Agreements also put us back into sort of like contract mentality. Yeah. When what I'm looking for in an agreement is a team mentality. Here's the vision. Here's the vision of where we're heading. This is the map of the territory. And here's how we're going to proceed through this territory.
Yeah.
So we have to watch for that. One of the pitfalls is getting adversarial, shifting into adversarial consciousness. Yeah.
Letting the agreement split.
Yeah, split us.
Versus come together about what the goals are and how we're going to get there.
Another issue, and this is best practices, really, not a pitfall, but best practices. I would encourage everyone, if you're making a minimum viable agreement, and if agreements don't just like, oh, we write them down once and boom, it's there. Review it daily.
Oh yeah.
So our MVAs are usually about between half a page if they were typed, tops, or in our journal we usually handwrite them, and they usually take up one side of a journal page, which is just like a little 5x8 journal. They're not super long, so I read them every day, and I have a strong memory, and I review them, because it's really easy to not remember what I agreed to, especially if it was a bit of a stretch for me. If I was the one saying, yeah, I'm going to stretch in this direction, I will totally remember it differently.
Oh, yeah. There are unconscious forces at play here who might disrupt that memory process.
Yeah, I've watched you do it, where you will...
Yes, I'm speaking of me.
It's been so interesting to watch you, though. Like, we'll make an agreement, you'll write it all down, and then later that day even, I'll just say, so say back to me what you think the agreement is, and you'll just leave a whole part out.
Yep.
And I'm like, uh-oh. Right. That's that's when we say the unconscious will act on you. Yeah. That's what we mean.
It's not on purpose.
No.
Which means, it's a very simple solution. Go read it.
Right.
That's all.
So review daily. And if you're talking about a relationship agreement that's encouraging some expansivity and exploration, right before you head out on that date, or you go to that kink party, or whatever's going to happen, review it. Just review it. Remind yourself. And I've seen people do this too, where they absolutely remember the agreement incorrectly in a way that actually over controls them. You have done this. In fact, it happened the last time you were dating with someone. It was totally hysterical to me, because you came home way earlier than I expected, and you had done less than I expected. And I gently probed you during our debriefing about stuff. And I was like, that's interesting. I thought you were more into them. And you were like, yeah, but the agreement. I'm like, I don't think so. I don't think that's in the agreement. There's no limit there. Yeah. And so I had to get it back out. And you're like, oh, wow. What a crafty way for your inner prude.
That's it.
To control your activities. That was me. I didn't ask you for that. But you could tell yourself a story that you had promised me. Yep. Oh, no, I would never do that. I'm not going to participate in that. When really that's your inner counsel freaking out at you. Like, you've got parts that are running around doing stuff. And I've definitely been there too, but that was my favorite one.
That's a good one. Yeah, it's a really good example.
You missed out on some decent sex, I think.
I think I did. Yeah, might have made an error there.
Oopsie daisies. So before we close up, I think it would be good to just mention what I think the key element in making really great minimum viable agreements is, and that is your capacity to imagine. If you can imagine who in you might get hurt, who in you is on board with making this agreement, who in you is totally not okay with making this agreement. Those are really subtle things to pick up on, but we're all a multiplicity, right? Like we are all made of conscious and unconscious motivations, parts, whatever language you want to use around that. I use the language of inner counsel. Who in you is totally game to uphold and stay in integrity with this agreement? Who in you, even as you're making it, is imagining ways to violate it?
Already imagining ways to sabotage and violate.
Yeah. So who in you isn't even on board for making agreements and is pissed about that?
Mm-hmm.
And what will they do? This being able to imagine into this and being able to imagine into what you will need if you are hurt. Like what will you need if you have like a totally amazing opportunity in front of you? How would this change? The more you are able to imagine into the future, the easier it's going to be to have an agreement that accounts for a broader picture. So if you struggle with your imagination, that's okay, but I would encourage you to make smaller containers then, so that you can experiment and then like in kind of pretty quick succession go through some iterations of your agreements, because the MVA process is at heart iterative. It is designed to happen over and over again. You may reuse the same MVA and say, yeah, this one worked great, or we're going to tweak it, but we're going to reuse it. But it is iterative.
And it's iterative from the standpoint of, at the end of this agreement, there'll be lots of opportunity to make another one and another one and another one. But then within each agreement time, within each little duration, there'll be plenty of time to revisit.
Right.
It's a just really good idea.
And hitting a deal breaker means that we revisit then. Yep. Right. So hitting a deal breaker that's listed in your agreement triggers an automatic, hey, we need to pause and revisit what's going on here. So when you're undertaking this process, remember, it's a framework designed to help you create an agreement with people or a person and increase your ability to be transparent, while also honoring that you get to have boundaries, you get to have edges, you get to have needs. This isn't about I don't want anybody to think that relationship agreements are about creating a scenario where you have to go along with things you're not okay with. They're actually about creating a sense of safety for you. So one more word on these. Your agreements can and should be asymmetric in order to account for who you each are and what you're doing. And we have a whole episode on asymmetric agreements. And if it's not out yet, it'll be out in a minute. The core of that whole episode is let your agreements be sufficiently asymmetric to address the fact that you are different people with different needs, wants, desires, boundaries. And make sure that they are not so asymmetric as to be abusive. This is why this is a process. This is why I teach this over the course of years, not over the course of weeks, right? It takes time to learn how to do this well.
It takes practice and revision and review. So it's not just something that you're going to do once. There, now I've done it.
And at the beginning, like when you and I were first making these, they would take a while. Like we would sit down to make an MVA and it would take 90 minutes, 2 hours. And, we'd wind up with like a few bullet points. And I'm like, why did that take so long? And it's because it's touching everything. Yeah. Because we actually don't know. We don't have shared terms. We don't have shared meaning yet. So we're creating that. But now, that last agreement, it literally, I remember making it with you in like minutes. And we were on a walk and you jotted phone notes and then we just put them in our journal when we got home. It couldn't have been more than 7 minutes. It was probably like 3.
Right. So it's a skill. It's a set of skills that you can totally learn.
And I just made one not that long ago with somebody I'm in a new relationship with. And let me say, it's some people find making agreements off-putting. And in my world, I'm like, cool, then we're not fit to be partners. If you can't enter into a conscious agreement with me, if you can't be in a process where we make clear what we're doing, you're just not a good fit for me. That's okay. I don't have to enjoy that, but I can be okay with it. Thanks for starting this conversation. I know it's a tricky one to try to get into a tight container, but I think this does provide a good 101.
A good 101 baseline.
And from
for
here,
agreements.
There's a lot more we could say about relationship agreements. We have other episodes on relationship agreements, but if you have follow-up questions, I would encourage anyone to join us for one of the AMAs. We have some Ask Me Anything times planned once a month for Playing with Fire listeners. So join us. You can find the next AMA if you go to joliehamilton.com/AMA. The next time will be listed there. You can grab your seat for free. There's no one right way to design your relationship. And lots of people, actually about 25%, according to a recent national survey, are interested in some type of open relationship. But how do you know if you are ready to open up happily? Not everyone is, and that's no problem. I've got a 60-second quiz that will give you the answer. And even better, you'll walk away with your next step, whether you're good to go or not so much when it comes to opening up. And this is no BuzzFeed nonsense. I personally designed this quiz from my years of academic research. Go to joliequiz.com. That's JOLIQUIZ.com and find out if you're ready to open up happily and what to do if you are or if you're not.